Hello and welcome to Lean in Leander. I'm your host, Andrew Naudine, and this is episode 9. This will start the Vote in Leander series. For those of you who have watched before, you might know what I'm talking about. For your first-time listeners or first-time watchers, voteinleander.com is where you can go to get information related to the election in May. This is a local election, so it's super important for you to make sure that you're registered to vote and get out to vote. Now, April 1st is the registration deadline, so if you have not already registered, you can go to voteinleander.com and register there. I've made it as simple as I possibly can. There's also some links on the page for checking your registration status and things of that nature. So if you don't know if you're registered, go check. If you haven't already registered, go register. And for those of you who might be younger viewers, you need to be 17 years old and 10 months at the time the election actually takes place. So if you're a younger voter and you haven't registered to vote, or you haven't voted in any previous elections because of your age, this might be an opportunity for you to cast your first vote and participate in the democratic process, which I encourage you to do so. Now, voteinleander.com is an initiative that I started, and I will be sending out information related to Vote in Leander on various podcasts moving forward. But you can go to that site today. It's already up, voteinleander.com, and find out if you're registered. Get registered to vote if you're not. Get your vote in. Local elections are super critical to the way that the city will move forward from here on in. And with the way that this city is growing, I actually am very passionate about making sure that we get a larger turnout at the voter booth. In the past few elections, we've had less than 5% of the population of the city of Leander turn out and make the decisions on who our elected officials are. For me, that is crazy. You actually have to be able to participate in this election beyond any other, in my opinion, because this is the one that affects you, where you live, how your community develops, what kind of answers you get to the questions that you have. But you can't be the person who doesn't vote. This is a nonpartisan election. So basically all of the candidates are running at large. They're basically all running for mayor. There's only 2 who have specified, I want to be mayor. And that's really the only difference. So what we're going to try to do with the Vote in Leander series is talk to them one-on-one and have a conversation. Maybe unlock a little bit of information, get them to let their guards down. It's not overtly political, although I'm sure we'll touch on some topics. But the idea is so that you, the viewer, or you, the listener, can have an opportunity to hear from the candidates themselves. And I believe this platform is a perfect opportunity for them to do so. So again, if you haven't already contacted me and you are a candidate, please reach out. I'm happy to schedule some time with you in the coming weeks to get you on Lean in Leander. So again, that website, one more time, voteinleander.com. Now, the first candidate that we'll be speaking with is Annette Sponseller. Annette is currently the City Council Place 2 representative. She was appointed to that position, I believe, back in October or November of last year to serve out the remainder of a term. And this will be her first election running on her own for the position. So I had the opportunity to sit with Annette at Humble Pint and have a little conversation. So I encourage you to sit back if you're online, grab a drink and watch the show. And if you're listening on the podcast, turn it up a little bit and listen to what Annette has to say. I think it's very interesting. We had a really good conversation, and again, I thank her for her time. So here it is, episode 9 of Lean in Leander, the first in the Vote in Leander series. Hello and welcome to this episode of Lean in Leander, the first in the Vote in Leander series. We're here at Humble Pint, and I'm with Annette Sponseller.
Hi.
All right. We're going to have a little conversation here today about Annette, get to introduce her a little bit more to the audience in general, and hopefully learn a little bit and help you make some decisions when you go to the polls in April and in May. So, Annette, we'll go ahead and take our masks off so we're okay here. I appreciate you taking some time for me today.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much. And I appreciate you making the effort to go through the process. Because it's a big responsibility. In my mind, I always look at it as a huge commitment of time. especially after you've been doing it for a little while, which you have, and we'll talk about that. But I want to thank you for taking the time, and I hope this is something that will help people and help you, get to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely.
All right. So for full transparency, Annette and I are somewhat acquainted. We know each other from a couple of different things. I've been in front of council and made some noise a couple of times. So we do know each other, but we're not, super familiar with each other. So I've done a little bit of research on Annette, kind of help us guide the conversation. And then this is not meant to be overtly political in nature, just so that you know. We talked about that earlier. I really want to try to use the Lean In program and this platform so that you as a voter can get a better sense of the candidate. I find that should be the most helpful, because we're going to have plenty of time to talk about the policies and all the specifics of the election. So I think we've got, 60 some odd days now, starting tomorrow, something like that? Okay, so anyway.
I'm trying not to count down days.
Not doing the countdown. I know, the pressures are mounting, so let me add to that.
Right.
No. Okay, so what I wanted to start with was just a little bit of background history on you, okay? The question will ultimately be, where are you from? But I did a little bit of research, okay? What I could find on the internet. And it looks like maybe you're from Michigan originally, is that right?
Chicago.
Chicago. So you're from Chicago.
Yeah.
So many Chicago. My daughter is in Chicago.
Really?
Yes, she actually went to DePaul University in Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And has done her postgraduate work at Adler University.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
She's entering the doctoral program later this year.
Full disclosure, I miss the food so much.
Yeah, Chicago's a foodie town, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Actually, we were just talking the other day about, I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's a place called Latinicity.
No.
Okay, I don't know how new it is in Chicago, but it's this whole kind of like food court kind of thing.
Really?
But it's all Latin flavors, Latin, different types of Latin restaurants all in one place.
Yeah.
And there's a little market there and everything. It's super cool.
That sounds awesome.
Super cool. And then there's another one that's all Italian like that up there. It's insane, the stuff they do. Great ideas up in Chicago.
Yeah.
We go a lot.
Yeah?
We go a lot.
That's good.
We probably go, on average, probably twice a year to
That's
Chicago.
good. I don't get to go back as much as I'd like.
Right.
Maybe once a year.
Okay.
Maybe.
So, like, were you from Chicago proper, or were you from one of the...
a south suburb.
South suburb?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
It was called South Holland.
South Holland, okay. So she's not in Chicago anymore. She's in... Where is the name of the city? Of course it was. I completely forget the city. But she's in... They're southeast, too.
Okay.
Sox fans. Okay, I've asked this question of other... I think Janelle Marthal is also
Sox
from
fan
Chicago.
all the way.
You're a Sox fan all the way?
Yes.
Man, I'm going to have an episode with Cubby and Sox fans.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to do it.
It's very divisive within the family, even during baseball season.
Oh, I can only imagine.
So.
I can only imagine. Well, there's There's New York, Chicago, and LA are really the only three cities where you get that, where there's two teams in the city.
Yep.
So.
And they always do what's called the Windy City Classic, which is a game that's the Cubs versus the Sox. So it's,
That's crazy. As an Astros fan, I do not like the Sox so much because they beat us in that one World Series, It was like...
That one time,
One time. It was enough. It was enough.
Yeah.
And of course, I always had kind of a soft spot for the Cubbies just because of the story, Like, what was it, 100 and something odd years?
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about,
Yeah. That's just pity.
Well, yeah, okay. But I'm a soccer guy, so baseball is the only sport in the Americas, in the United States, that has this, at least a similar historical perspective.
Right.
Of over 100 years of baseball. That's
Absolutely.
really the only. I think some of the other sports will claim it, but like baseball, you can go back and say, okay, hey, 100 years ago.
Right.
Right. And you can do the same thing in soccer. Very clearly in baseball.
Yes.
As opposed to some of the other sports where you're like, did that really happen? Was it just a couple of guys that got together and played football one afternoon?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anyway, so enough about Chicago.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because we're in Leander. Come on.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So, so I was completely wrong about that. But it looks like you've been here in Leander for about 10 years,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So directly from Chicago
Yes.
to Leander?
Yes.
Okay. And was it work or?
So at the time, unemployment in Chicago was over 10%.
Okay.
Chicago also has a very high sales tax.
Yeah.
So when I decided that I wanted to move, I was like, I'm going to move. Like, let's just go.
Right.
I'm not a big fan of the cold at all by any means. So, my brother at the time was living in Cedar Park.
Oh.
So I'd come down to visit a few times and seen the amazing school district and, the warm weather.
Well, until about a week ago.
Right. And I was like, I mean, that sounds great. So I moved here.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you just packed up and
Yeah.
made it down here.
My kiddos were, I also had a kiddo in first grade, about to start kindergarten, and a 2-year-old. So schools were really at the top of my list. So yeah, we all just moved down here.
Timing, I think, then too, you probably considered their age as far as moving them from one school to another,
Right.
and that's a big move. That's not like across town. That's literally to a different state.
And I was like,
So
if I'm going to do it,
do it now.
do it now.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. Okay, cool. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. So now you're here in Leander for the past 10 years. Who is Annette Sponseller?
So I work at Girl Scouts of Central Texas. I work in inside sales and reporting. So I do all of our data analysis and stuff like that. And that passion for data and numbers really came from my master's degree, which I got in 2015.
Okay. And that was from, you did the University of Cincinnati, right?
That was my master's.
And then you did Purdue University
for my
Calmet?
bachelor's.
Your bachelor's. Okay, so I had it the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was really where my love of data and numbers grew.
Right.
Prior to that, really, I always thought I wasn't a math girl or, it wasn't for me, but that degree, invigorated a passion for data in me.
I share some of that with you. I'm kind of a data wonk, okay?
Yeah.
I do, because I don't know at what point, but the phrase "numbers never lie" just seared into my mind at some point, growing up. And I think it was probably, I'm in sales too, so we share that. But I was in the hotel industry, and it's very data-driven in the hotel industry. You're looking at daily, average daily rates, occupancies, and things of that nature. So you're constantly looking at numbers. And wasn't a huge math fan per se, but math didn't scare me, I guess you could say, So yeah, I started getting into the numbers there, and now anything I do, I'm like, okay, what are the numbers saying?
Me too. That's pretty much the inside sales portion of my job is I have staff, and they if someone expresses interest in Girl Scouts by clicking on a Facebook ad or going to our website, that's the inside part.
I gotcha.
Versus outside, which is more like recruiting.
Right.
So she reaches out to them, talks to them,
helps them find a troop.
Right. Things like that. Or if they want to be a leader, she talks to them about it. And then she kind of really handles that, and I handle all of the data.
Okay.
Because we use Salesforce and Looker, and we have a great senior leadership staff who are very data oriented, which is great. So yeah, that's
cool. You kind of answered the question, because I was going to ask you, so what do you sell at Girl Scouts? It can't just be cookies, okay?
Right.
So that's interesting. That's interesting that you would look at it. I guess it's really more of a, I would hesitate to say HR oriented, but it is, you're kind of talking about personnel there, right? I mean, just from...
I don't really work with personnel. What I work with is this is our membership number. This is how many girls we have. This is how many adults we have. This is how many volunteers we have compared to last year.
So you'd be able to see if there was maybe something on the horizon, like we don't have enough volunteers for X, or
for this grade.
this is much better over here, but this community needs a little help.
Right. We do a lot of work with trying to make our membership proportional to the community.
Okay.
We want to serve and be representative of our community. So I do a lot of those numbers as well, so that our DEI committee knows, areas that we have to focus. We also do market segmentation to find where the people that we want to reach are, and then, what they need.
Okay.
So we do that too. We also have a national Girl Scout Voices Count survey that goes to every girl parent and troop leader in the country. And I get that raw data back, and then try and tell a story of where we are compared to last year, and where we need to move forward. I read every single comment that they put, because it gives us another layer of information to be able to, to bring Girl Scouts to everyone, which is really my goal, because
Sure.
It's an amazing program.
Sure. No, I mean, again, I did an episode a couple of weeks ago with Janelle Marthal, who's a troop leader here. And I was really taken by the fact that, the one thing that stuck out to me was, I think she had 5 girls in her troop that were part of the gold and silver,
the
bronze thing that y'all do. That's kind of like Eagle Scouts for the Boy Scouts, which floored me. I was just like, holy cow, that's a really good number. And when I talked to her a little bit about that, she was like, oh yeah, that's a lot of people, or a lot of girls. Typically, there's not that many that do that. So, again, kudos. Because the Girl Scouts is a neat organization. I've always found it to be pretty fun. I only had one daughter. She wasn't interested in Girl Scouts, but I was always kind of like, okay. And I had been I was a Boy Scout, I had no interest in being an Eagle Scout or anything like that. No, it was, it's like I told Janelle, I was like, I learned how to start a fire, I learned how to tie a knot, that kind of stuff. So
I have 3
cool.
kiddos, and my oldest is a girl. She's a senior in high school, and she's working on her gold award right now.
So she's working on her gold.
Yes.
Okay, well, kudos.
She just had her last cookie booth ever on Friday night.
Did she cry?
She didn't. I almost did, but she didn't. It's bittersweet because cookie seasons are very hectic.
Right.
And then, so as a parent, you're always like, oh, let's get cookie season over with. Mm-hmm. But then you're like, but it's the very last one ever.
That's funny. That is funny. I remember that. I always equate it to soccer because my son was in soccer, and my daughter swam too.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
When she did her I think the last time she swam competitively, the team that she was on won the region or something like that. And so it was kind of super bittersweet because she had helped build that club. It was a brand new neighborhood club, and she built it up to like a competitive group, and she swam with them the whole time. So that was always like, I remember those things.
Yeah,
I'm far past them now, but I always think about like, oh wow, I remember that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's cool. That's really, really neat. So you've been able to kind of interweave some of your personal passions with your work life.
Yes.
So I would say it's fair to say you have a satisfying work life. You like what you do?
I love my job.
That's cool.
It would be hard to pull me away from this organization.
Right.
It would be definitely very hard.
All right. Well, that's super cool. That's super, super neat. And again, I think this is a good point to maybe pause a little bit and say, as a current member of City Council, it's essentially a volunteer position. You're not getting paid. You're spending an enormous amount of time of your own doing the things that help guide and make decisions for the city going forward. So I always think it's really important to talk about that when we talk about, especially with the candidates. I want to make a point of that. You're currently serving. You started, I think you took Michelle Stevenson's position, right? That was October of last year, right?
October 15th was when I was appointed, and I was sworn in on November 5th.
Okay. And you just served out the remainder of her term, essentially.
Correct.
And now you're running basically for the first time.
Correct.
For the position. And it's position 2, right?
Yes, the same spot I'm in.
Okay, perfect. So let's do a little bit of history on what you've done in the city. And I'm probably going to come back to some of these things. But you served on the Charter Review Commission, the Ethics Commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission. You were part of the comprehensive plan. I don't know if it was on the commission
Advisory.
or advisory board.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been involved with a lot of city stuff. Again, you've been here about 10 years. How long did it take before you were kind of like, I'm going to go do something over here?
So it really started with the Treehouse.
Okay. So there's a story here. So let's find out about the Treehouse.
So we were building a treehouse in our yard, and it was tagged by code enforcement. So our yard, we have a fence, but then there's 10 feet behind that fence that we own, but is a utility easement.
Gotcha.
So we have a big tree that's in the utility easement right up against the fence, kind of, and it's huge. And my husband built a treehouse in it, and then there was just 4 legs down on the bottom, 2 of those being on the utility easement.
Gotcha.
So they tagged it and said that we had to tear it down. And I was like, what? So we emailed the city and talked with them, and they gave us a list of things that we could do. Basically, we would have to file for a license to encroach on that utility easement. So we had to get like letters from every utility provider, some who don't even provide utilities in my area, to say that it was okay with them for us to have that there. So then we had to take all of that and we had to file for the license to encroach with the city. And we were not familiar with the process of city council, how to get something passed, a license to encroach, none of it. We were definitely out of our depths. So we were reading ordinances and, building codes and all of these things. And it went before council. So we brought our kids out. We're like, we're going to save the treehouse, like.
Protest.
Right. So we went. It ended up being on consent agenda. So we didn't even have to get up and
But you're ready to fight, though. You were ready to fight.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So we won our license to encroach. So the treehouse lives, which we were very excited about. Shortly after that, a former city council member had posted on Facebook that there was a short-term volunteer opportunity to learn more about the city. And I was like, oh, look, honey, just a little tiny volunteer job.
Little did she know.
We're kind of almost serial volunteers. We do a lot with Scouts, Girl Scouts, previously with Scouts BSA. So he was like, really? Sometimes we would go to meetings and he would say, okay, I'll agree not to volunteer for anything and you agree not to volunteer. So I was like, well, that sounds neat. It's short term. It's not a huge commitment. So I applied and was interviewed by the city council at the time for the position, and I got it. And it was great. I was vice chair on that commission, and I thought I believe we brought 8 amendments to our charter.
So which commission was that?
That's the charter review.
That's the charter
That
review.
was the first one.
Okay.
Because it's a very short term. It's a determinate amount of time.
Right.
So we brought 8 amendments that were approved by City Council, and then they were approved by City Council to be put on the ballot.
Gotcha.
So then I believe 7 of the 8 passed, and those changed our charter, which is, to me, it's our Constitution of Leander.
Right.
So that was the first one, and I was like, ooh, I really like that.
You got a little taste
of it.
There's
a lot of research and digging in, and we do this. What do other cities near us do? And I really enjoyed it.
Cool. That's awesome. So you really kind of answered my next question, sort of. But obviously that's your reasoning for getting involved in the first place. We'll start with the Treehouse, and then we go to charter review, then to ethics commission, and all of these things. I've had some experience as well. I currently serve on the ethics commission, and I was part of an economic development committee with the chamber, which was really more conversational than it was really, active. There was really not action things that we could do
less
there.
policy
Yeah,
making.
we really wasn't. It was more like what's happening, what could we do, ideation type of stuff. It was just the setup. Had nothing. It's not a negative. It's just the way that it was. And then I'm also on the mayor's Citizens Advisory Committee now. So we do something similar with them. We talk about things, make suggestions, and sometimes those suggestions make it to actual actions, which is nice. So the commissions that you've been on are all kind of impactful commissions. Ethics, it depends on what's going on, but you still do some ordinance review and things of that nature. I've recently gone through that myself. I think it's taken almost a year and a half to get that because of COVID and all the disruptions. But hopefully it'll be something. I think it was it presented in the last meeting?
Yep.
Or it was in the last meeting that they presented it, right?
Yep.
So what happened? I haven't
So it
looked at that.
passed.
Okay, cool.
And then I believe you guys are all, after the filing of our financials, are going to review that portion.
Yes, yeah, because we looked at really the forms and things of that nature that are necessary or being requested of candidates and sitting members. There was some conversation as to it being a lot of information, like more information than you necessarily would think you might need.
Right.
At least that's how it was presented to us. But I think overwhelmingly, the actual commission felt like, okay, no, more is better. So we're going to come back and take a look at that. Again, I don't want to go into granular details. We're going to come back to that because we didn't want to change it right before this filing, because then it would require everybody to do all this other stuff that they had already done stuff for. So it's like, all right, let's leave it alone. Let's come back to that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you're familiar with that because you've probably done some similar things. So we've talked about what you do for a living. So your reason for running now is that you've been on the council now for a few months.
Yeah.
And so you have an opportunity to now serve a full term of your own. Was this something that you had considered prior to being appointed? I mean, I know you were serving on the planning. Okay, so even while you're on the Planning and Zoning Commission, you're thinking, I want to run for council.
I had planned on running for place 2.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So had you not been appointed, you would still be a candidate this time around.
Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. So now I want to kind of get into a little bit more of this is a generic question. Okay. This is not, I don't want to, as I said earlier, I'm not here to put you on the spot. I don't want to make you, this is not a gotcha moment. This is like, hey, let's just talk about some stuff. And one of those things, some of that stuff, is ideation. What kind of ideas are you bringing with you, whether it's been talked about before or not, okay, but that you feel could positively impact the community at large? Because everybody, regardless of whether you're running for place 2 or the mayor, you're at-large candidates, so your ideas should encompass the entirety of Leander, which I think is always an interesting thing to talk about, because I think people in general, and this is not meant to be a negative either, but I think people in general kind of are right here. They're looking at what affects them and what impacts the people around them, and their community. Like in their community can be their subdivision, right? But when you kind of zoom out from there, you have to look at the whole of the city. You have to really kind of be a little bit more holistic.
Absolutely.
And, kind of, okay, well, if I do this over here, how does it affect this over here?
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, what are your thoughts there? What are some of your ideas?
So my passion is water.
Okay.
My husband actually works in water and wastewater.
Okay.
So I lean on him a lot. Mm-hmm. And he was finally like, go take this water class. Like, do it. So I did, and I learned a ton. And that is really, it was what I planned to run on.
Okay.
Along with that, transportation. Mm-hmm. I do believe that we get a lot of requests for, I want a light here because I don't like it, and I want this here, and having a plan that says, as we grow, these are the places, mm-hmm. Working with the police department, because it's not just a traffic light to monitor the flow of traffic, but it also has to do a lot with safety. Mm-hmm. Our roads in general, the safety that plays in, like the vegetation along Crystal Falls and the median has been brought up multiple times as an issue. for visibility and in turn safety. So that's something that we need to look at. Do we not allow it? Do we make sure that they have to trim it? They can only use certain plants, whatever we have to do. Transportation to me is more than just putting a light where there was a car accident. It's about safety. It's about traffic flows as we get bigger. That's going to be, goodness knows, none of us want a 620 or a 1431 here in Leander.
Yep.
So how do we do that?
Yep.
You know, how do we plan long term for that? And water is another one of those. You know, I feel that both of those affect every citizen in Leander.
100%.
With securing Leander's water, there's 3 areas we have to secure, because water is not just one thing. We can't, there's the source, there's a capability of treatment, and there's distribution. We can't just go out and get another source if that source doesn't mix with the way that we treat water or the way that we distribute it, you know. So all 3 of those are important, and they affect one another. Like the source of your water will affect how you can treat it, which will affect distribution. Do you know what I mean? If we're mixing BCRUA water with our water and we're using a groundwater source, what are those implications?
Yeah.
Because they're treated very, very differently. One's monochloramines, one's free chlorine. It can be, you know, will it build redundancy? You know, how those things will affect our residents. That's, to me, the most important.
Well, it's a complex issue, to say the least. Okay?
Definitely.
And I think a lot of the arguments in Leander, which I've been party to, again, full transparency, I've brought my concerns about water to the council before. And I tried to do as much research as I could, given the sources and what I understood the issues to be with that particular framing of the water issue. But in doing so, again, you know, kind of a data wonk, I start finding things and I'm like digging. You know, for instance, one of the things that I found very interesting but troubling was the fact that with all of the wells that are located, the publicly available records for wells, some that were owned by the city even.
We used to work on a well system. Our water was...
Well, what troubled me was there hadn't been any kind of review since like 1979. At least publicly available records showed no monitoring of those wells since 1979, at least what I could find. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means, hey, based on publicly available information, this seems like a problem. If we're not looking at this, then we're missing data. To our point earlier, is that if you don't have the information, you cannot make a well-informed decision. So that's super interesting that you are already thinking about that. Well, I think it's a very important question, and I think it goes, for me, it goes to really kind of a central issue with serving on council or being in that position, is that you're doing it as a volunteer and you have a full-time job. Okay, so when are you supposed to do that? I mean, I'm fortunate enough to work from home. You know, I'm entrepreneurial, and you know, I've been working with startups since I moved here to Austin in the tech segment. So it gives me some freedoms that most people don't necessarily have. Okay, with that, I can sometimes take an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3, depending on if it's a Monday or a Friday. You know, but I'll go down the rabbit holes. I will, and so you start to look for the data, and you start to try to put together, okay, what's the information that, you know, that is important to this argument? Yeah, if I'm going to make a point, I better have some data to back up what it is that I'm talking about. And I've personally, again, I'm not talking about me, but that's how I approach things. And it's interesting to see that I think you probably have a very similar approach. That's terribly, terribly interesting. So we're going to come back to water, because I do have another little question about water, but we'll save that for a little bit. Local business. Small business is a huge driver in Leander.
Absolutely.
We've seen that. I talked to Bridget about that when we had our interview, about the impact of the tax revenues given COVID. Actually, positive stuff for the city, And one of my questions to her at that point was, okay, how do we understand where that's coming from? I think we've been able to kind of assume, and I think it's a fair assumption, that a good deal of that tax revenue comes from the larger box stores, the Lowe's and things of that nature, that drive HEB. They're going to drive a lot of tax revenue locally because it's being spent
Absolutely.
here. But that cannot completely account for the increase in the tax revenues. There have to be other things that are going on there. And, you know, a lot of people talk about the lack of local restaurants and the lack of that kind of stuff here in Leander. But when you're home and, you know, it's more convenient, then you start ordering from those locally sourced restaurants. So my question to you there is, what do you currently do in your personal life as well as professionally to support local businesses? What is it that
we
small
eat
businesses?
a lot of local food.
Okay, you don't have to name any favorites. Okay,
Can I?
You can talk about things that you specifically like. But when you visit the local purveyors and people who are small business, such as the owners here at Humble Pint, do you do that because they're local, or do you do that because they're good?
Both.
Okay.
I generally don't wear this shirt or go into any restaurants
I'm
and
Annette. I'm in
hey,
place too.
here's my I don't do that. I believe that our local economy, especially with COVID, is so important that if we are going to eat out, which honestly in the last 3 months has been multiple times a week, we do it locally, and our family definitely has some big favorites, you know, and over time you get to know them, you know, and they're amazing people who are trying to do awesome things. You know, they contribute to their community. You know, anytime anyone asks, that sense of belonging and community is what I want every Leander business to feel and every resident to feel when they go in and shop those local places.
Well, I think those are, you know, there's a lot of conversation, and I've heard it several times. I've heard the phrase, you know, it's a growing city, but we want to hold on to the small town, you know. And while I understand the passion behind that idea, I don't believe that idea is realistic at all, given the numbers that we're looking at.
I don't either.
You know, and I'm going to kind of segue there a little bit, but like for instance, I looked at population in Leander, and I believe it's now around 60, probably closing in on 70,000 people in Leander, whereas 10 years ago it was maybe half of that.
It's like 26.
Yeah.
26,000.
So, I mean, that's, and I think it was another episode that I did where I was talking about it. It's like for every person that lived in Leander, there's now 3 people who didn't.
I think at one point they were saying 17 people move to Leander every day.
That's crazy. I mean, but that's got to make an impact on how the city looks, works, thinks, etc., so forth. And so I'm going to use that to pivot a little bit here. So, for instance, what I'm trying to do with Vote in Leander is it's really a get out the vote.
Absolutely.
It's nonpartisan. I'm not supporting any specific candidate or anything along those lines with Vote in Leander.
That's awesome.
That is meant to just get people to register to vote. By the way, April 1st is the deadline. And then go vote, go participate, because local elections are the most impactful election. I know there's a lot of noise out there about this, that, and the other, but at the end of the day, the vote that you make locally is the one that actually impacts you specifically.
Definitely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yeah. So
local city elections
make a difference.
Yes.
They make a difference.
Yes.
When I look at the numbers of the local city elections, this just astonishes me. And the reason I bring it up is because in 2016, there were 1,163 votes. 1163.
Yep.
Okay? In 2016, which we were already at 2016, probably closing in on 40, 50,000 people in the city, right?
Definitely.
That's not 1%.
Wow.
That's less than a fraction of 1%. Even if we fast forward to 2018, which if you look at 2018 and 2019, the numbers are a little bit different. They're a little bit better. 2018 was a mayoral election, so there's going to be a little bit more focus. If we look at that, there was only 2,364 voters in that election.
And it's harder to get voters to come to a May election.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, a mayoral election, or when there's a presidential election as well. You know, you have much greater turnout.
Sure.
May elections,
It's difficult.
it's very hard.
So again, my efforts there, and I appreciate you saying that that's a good idea, because
It is.
I'm like, okay.
It's great.
You can go to voteinleander.com. You can find the dates of when you need to register by. You can also register online. So if you haven't already registered for May's election, register now. And you'll have an opportunity to make your voice heard in May. Maybe you'll vote for Annette. Maybe you'll vote for somebody else. But vote. That's the point. And then we can have conversations about, okay, we have 5% of the population. I mean, I think that's an achievable goal.
It would,
and it would be huge.
It would be huge.
It would be huge for this community.
It would be huge.
Because we'd get more input from more people.
Absolutely.
And we'd know a little bit better. I still think that's way too low, but we'd know,
I agree.
We'd know
I agree.
better.
But we have to start somewhere,
you have to start
right?
somewhere, right? It has to be an achievable. It has to be smart, you know? What is it? Simple,
Measurable,
achievable,
Yep.
realistic, and timely.
Yes. Yep.
So Annette and I have a couple of things in common. We've gone through a few sales courses, obviously,
Right.
the same ones.
Right.
That's crazy. Okay, so I'm going to turn again really quick, because I do want, you mentioned the water, so I think this is fair.
Yep.
Okay? And I don't want to go into huge granular detail, okay?
Okay.
This is really kind of a top level thing. But when I looked at this, this was the city's statement on the water, like why we lost the water.
Okay.
And, you know, when I read through this, I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I think it's fair to say that there were multiple failures. Okay? I think PEC, there were some failures there. I think with, we know that there's some issues with the Sandy Creek water treatments. Oh, there's some issues with the BCRUA. So we know those things exist. We now know, or at least if we didn't know, we know very publicly that there was a water main that
A
is
raw
responsible
water
for
line.
that pulling in the raw water that's either broken or had leaks, needed to be fixed. It's in the process of getting addressed.
Yes.
When we talk about those things, one of the things that struck me, and you just had this meeting yesterday,
Yeah.
okay? One of the things that struck me about the agenda and let me backtrack a little bit. The information that I saw on the agenda from, I think it was a third-party source, was that the water survey, the
water study.
the water study? That was the water study that was
Yes.
included in that.
Yes.
Okay, because we did talk about this a little bit before, because it hadn't been finished.
Right.
And I'm like, how are we supposed to figure out what we're supposed to do if we don't even know what the problems are?
Because we need this
data. Yes, exactly. So, but I'll be honest. When I look at that water study, it doesn't tell me anything. I thought it was very disappointing from that perspective. And I don't mean to point the finger at the whoever was responsible for that. But it did not solve anything. It didn't give you any information. What it told you was, here's some solutions. They're really expensive. And I'm like, that's not what we're looking for.
Right.
You know? So I put to you, from a responsibility perspective, from a city council member, which you currently are, how does the council look at that? Was there, I haven't seen the video.
You
so
should
I wasn't
watch
there.
it.
I need to watch it, probably.
We did send them back and
Okay.
said, this is not the answer to our questions.
Good.
You know what I mean?
Good.
So hopefully they will be bringing that back as well.
Right.
Um,
And I think that there's a, it strikes me, because I think that a lot of people who are engaged with Leander as a city, and this is a very broad stroke, okay? But since we're talking about it, I find that the answers that we get from developers, from parties engaged with developers, from people making simple presentations, it's extremely lacking in data. It does not have the information that you need. And again,
they're sales pitches.
they're sales pitches, exactly. And we straddle both of those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, so I recognize that, you know, and you know, there's a phrase that comes with sales that a lot of us know, and I'm not going to go into that one, but if you know one, then you know
Right.
how to spot them.
Right.
And I'm not saying that that's the case, but I find that perhaps, would you agree with the statement if I were to say Leander needs to present itself as a more inquisitive city.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I love data and research.
Right.
You know, if you look at when a development comes to the city, there's about 8 to 9 items on the agenda that come along with it. The city does a presentation. They have a very comprehensive planning analysis, which I highly recommend everyone reads, you know. And then there's the the applicant presentation.
Mm-hmm.
That's your sales pitch. You know what I mean? But it's really the responsibility of every single council member to research every single thing that's on the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know about it, I will find out about it,
Mm-hmm.
because that is my role.
Right.
Because I can't make personally any type of decision until I have at least some data or some information. You know, I might not have it all, and I'm sure I'll make wrong choices sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but I have to go on the data available to me, and I have to do my best with that.
Do you think it's fair to say that if you don't have all the data, that an option is always to stop and get more data? Is that
yeah.
fair? I think that
You can table things.
Yeah, I
and-
think you've spoken to that. I'm really happy to hear that. Again, I have not had a chance to watch that one because it kind of caught me by surprise. I really wasn't expecting it, and when I found out what it was, I was like, oh, I need to look at that, because I'm going to be talking to people, and I want to try to inform myself so I can have a reasonable conversation like this.
Absolutely.
To where I'm not coming to you and I don't know anything. You know,
Right.
I don't, just like what you just said, I don't know everything, but I know enough to be able to ask some questions and like, hey, let's talk about this and let's have a conversation. I forgot where I was going with that. Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's great that you're saying some of the things that you're saying. And again, it's important for people out there in Leander who are watching, who are listening on the podcast, to understand that from the candidates. And I think those are realistic things. And again, we're not getting into granular policy details here. That's not the point of this particular episode. This is really just
Not yet.
we can. Not yet. We're going to get there. We'll get there. Promise you. If I can make it happen, I'm going to get there. But the idea is to let people see you a little bit, and I appreciate you taking some time to kind of like let down your guard a little bit here and be very human, because that's what we all are at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I appreciate all your time. I'm going to give you an opportunity here to do a little bit of your own plug. Okay.
Oh.
So if you look right over here into the camera, let people know where they can find information about you, what your websites are, anything along those lines.
So you can find information at Annette Leander.com, or my Facebook page is Annette Sponseller, Leander City Council Place 2, and register to vote if you haven't. And
any Twitter handles, Instagram, or anything like that?
I just don't have the time.
You just don't have the time.
I do have an Instagram, but I don't really post many things.
So those would be the places that people could go to really
or you
find
can email me at Annette4Leander@gmail.com. I'm happy to answer any questions about water or your concerns or comments or something that you think that isn't on the table that we need to bring up in city council or with the city. I'm happy to talk about all of that.
Fantastic. I appreciate your time. Everybody, this is Annette Sponseller. She's running for place 2 with the Leander City Council. Again, it's an at-large position, so everybody in Leander can vote for her, and you should vote for whoever your candidate is. And again, we're going to put you back to voteinleander.com. I'm actually just because of what Annette just said, I'm going to add an email address to that website. So if you have specific issues or things that you want to have me ask some of the candidates, you can actually forward me that information. You can also use, what is the address? Suggestions at leaninleander.life. Okay, that's the Leander website. Which is not quite up yet, but we'll get there. We're getting there slowly. The vote in Leander thing was so much easier to do. It really was. It's like 3 pages. Boom.
Right.
Anyway, so I appreciate your time. Thank
Absolutely.
you
Thank you.
very much for doing this. I wish you the very, very best of luck in your run. I know that you'll stay engaged with Leander regardless of the outcome. So
Definitely.
I definitely have enjoyed this. It was a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next time on Lean In Leander.
Bye.
Bye.